Hey, what's up, everybody? It's time for another breakdown, and this one's gonna sting if you're from New York. We're talking about the top 10 most dangerous neighborhoods in NYC for 2025. Not last year, not the 90s, but right now, in real numbers. Because the city that never sleeps is also the city that never stops bleeding statistics. And trust me, the data paints a wild picture. According to the NYPD's own CompStat reports, major crimes jumped nearly 6% citywide since last year, with felony assaults up 11%, robberies up 8%, and grand larcenies leading the pack. Gun violence is down slightly, sure, but the number of illegal firearm seizures hit an all-time high, over 7,000 guns pulled off city streets in just 12 months. And while overall crime dipped in tourist zones, the outer boroughs are getting hammered. The Bronx alone saw a 12% increase in violent incidents since 2023. So yeah, this isn't just about bad neighborhoods. It's about where daily life has turned into a gamble. I'm talking places where the cost of living is through the roof, but the streetlights still flicker. Where a luxury high-rise might stand next to a block that feels like 1982. From Brooklyn's East End to the edges of the Bronx, the data doesn't lie. And if you live in one of these zip codes, you already know the danger isn't hype. It's just your reality. All right, let's get into it. The 10 most dangerous neighborhoods in New York City, 2025. Number 10, Fordham, Bronx. You might hear people shrug and say, Bronx, what else is new? But Fordham deserves a slot on this list because it's a perfect case of how neighborhoods can struggle with layered disadvantages even as parts of the city improve. Fordham is split between the 46th and 52nd NYPD precincts, which historically have per capita violent crime rates above city average. In recent years, there have been surges in robberies, aggravated assaults, and a persistent problem with property crime spilling over into daylit commercial corridors, shops, bodegas, transit hubs. The area is also a crossroads of transit. Multiple subway lines, buses, and pedestrians converge there, which means more targets of opportunity for pickpocketing, purse snatches, car break-ins. Here's a lesser-known fact. Fordham is home to one of the densest clusters of street-level, open-air retail. Used clothing stalls, phone as accessory stands, used to operate semi-informally. And those micro-retail zones often lack formal oversight, lighting, surveillance, or police presence. That makes them soft targets at night. Add in that the precinct boundaries straddle residential areas and commercial zones, making jurisdictional confusion a thing, and you get a zone where criminals sometimes exploit gaps in policing. Also worth noting, property values in Fordham have in the last couple years begun creeping upward faster than median incomes in the area, squeezing long-time residents. That mismatch can intensify frustration, shadow economies, and petty crime. Despite some community renewal efforts, youth engagement, small business grants, violent crime there remains about 20–30% above the borough average on many blocks. So Fordham earns number 10. Not the absolute worst, but dangerous enough that you don't wander casually at night. Number 9, East Harlem. Don't let the Harlem name fool you into romanticism. East Harlem, aka El Barrio, is a neighborhood with deep cultural roots, but also deep challenges. On paper, some crime statistics have improved over decades, but in 2025, it still sits high in the danger rankings. One thing most people don't realize is the density of social services in East Harlem. More homeless shelters, addiction treatment facilities, transitional housing, mental health institutions per capita than in many other Manhattan neighborhoods. That concentration has a double edge. It helps serve vulnerable populations, but it also draws transient populations and sometimes escalates conflicts, especially at night, when supervision is thinner. Another dimension, the built environment. Many side streets have narrow alleys, rear access corridors, semi-abandoned stairwells, and a lot of interior-facing apartment blocks with minimal street visibility. Those weakly visible corridors can act as escape routes or concealment zones for muggings or assaults. But here's a twist. East Harlem also has pockets of gentrification, restaurants, galleries, new developments, which raises the stakes. Once criminal actors notice foot traffic, they shift tactics. More discreet thefts, phone snatching, burglary of short-term rentals. Also, East Harlem's health and environmental factors matter. Its asthma rate is 5 times the national average, and many residents say poor infrastructure, broken lighting, weak cameras, inconsistent policing amplify the perception of danger. The interplay of high density, social stressors, mixed development, and shifting demographics makes East Harlem tough to fully classify as fixed danger. It's volatile. Hence it sits at number 9. Number 8. Jamaica, Queens. You rarely hear Jamaica, Queens talked about in danger lists without a caveat. It's a huge, multifaceted neighborhood with high-traffic hubs, JFK access, train stations, shopping. But that's exactly part of the problem. Jamaica is a major transit nexus. The Long Island Railroad, subway hubs, buses all converge here. That creates ideal conditions for transit crime, muggings on stairwells, pickpocketing in crowds, transit-linked assaults. In 2025, local reporting shows increased incidents around late-night buses near Sutphin Boulevard and a persistent uptick in gunplay near commercial strips. Some precincts in Jamaica have seen year-to-date shooting incidents rise by 20-25% above their 2024 baseline, local news accounts. What many don't know, Jamaica also has a sprawling network of dead zones, underpasses, vacant lots, lightless streets adjacent to expressways, Van Wyck Archer, which make patrols harder in those edges. Criminals exploit those margins. There's also a phenomenon where robbery rings, groups operating in coordination, hit multiple blocks in rotating shifts across precinct lines, making it hard for any single precinct to fully track patterns. The neighborhood is also economically stratified. Within a few blocks, you'll shift from high-end apartments to struggling multifamily row houses. That disparity breeds tension and boundary crime, small turf disputes, car break-ins crossing the lines of gentrified zones. Finally, due to the transit hub status, Jamaica is also a corridor for criminals coming from other boroughs, not just domestic to Jamaica. All that pushes Jamaica into number 8 in 2025. Number 7, Soundview, Bronx. Now we get deeper into the Bronx, where often the perceptions of danger and the realities align more starkly. Soundview is a case in point. For people not super familiar, Soundview is in the southeastern Bronx, east of the Bronx River, with large public housing complexes, older walk-ups, and commercial strip corridors along Archer, Bruckner, etc. In 2025, according to some local community policing reports, the precincts covering Soundview report some of the highest rates of felony assault per capita in the borough, in some census tracts exceeding 300 assaults per 100,000 people. It also has significant challenges with youth violence clustering on weekend nights. Unspoken detail. Soundview's geography creates cut-through routes, minor streets that connect major roadways, used by drivers seeking shortcuts. Those street layouts encourage drag racing, illegal car modifications, and sideshow culture. Some thefts and street-level standoffs have involved modified cars, stolen license plates, or coordinated robberies tied to car theft rings. Also, the adjacency to the Bruckner Expressway and access ramps means criminals can quickly flee across borough lines. That mobility factor raises the risk. Another less noted fact: certain public housing blocks in Soundview have very narrow sight lines, long facades with few windows facing the street, so break-ins to back units or rear corridors happen with relative invisibility. Meanwhile, Soundview has also seen rising rates of grand larceny auto in the past 2 years, with some precincts reporting a 15-18% increase over 2023 levels. The infrastructure strain, lighting, camera coverage, policing staffing, is lagging behind the crime growth, so residents often feel the thin blue line is stretched. That combination of physical vulnerability, crime data, and transit accessibility puts Soundview firmly at number 7. Number 6. Bedford-Stuyvesant, Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn. Some of you might say, wait, Bed-Stuy? I thought that was hot and rising. And you'd be partly right. Bed-Stuy is undergoing gentrification with cafes and loft conversions popping up. But that very transformation is a double-edged sword, and in 2025 it helps make Bed-Stuy a high-risk zone. The neighborhood is large and heterogeneous, so while some blocks feel relatively safe, Others remain deeply troubled. According to multiple rankings, e.g. 13 Most Dangerous Neighborhoods 2025, Bed-Stuy frequently shows up around number 6. Here's stuff many don't talk about. Bed-Stuy has become a testing ground for middle-actor crime, crimes that are too small to attract major media attention, phone snatching, laptop thefts, packages stolen off stoops, but that cumulatively wear down residents' sense of security. Because of the influx of wealthier residents, there's more to steal. Designer deliveries left on porches, e-bikes, electric scooters, trendy groceries. That invites more frequent low-level theft. Also, gangs and crews have slowly re-emerged in certain pockets, not always in full-blown turf wars, but in micro-gangs that tag, do drive-by shootings, or engage in street-level drug retail. Some of those don't show up in aggregate statistics, but show in hotspot mapping. Another lesser-known dimension, Bed-Stuy's transit nodes, for example, near the Franklin Avenue off Fulton Street corridor, have more incidents of subway platform assaults, escalator fights, theft from platforms late at night. Police insiders tell me that the precinct there has had to redeploy officers more flexibly, chasing scatter crimes rather than focusing on static hotspots. And the disparity between housing cost and local income is stark. Median rents have jumped 40–50% in some parts, but many long-term residents haven't seen income growth to match. That creates greater economic stress, which correlates, in criminology studies, with upticks in property crime and theft. When you combine all that, rising targets, persistent pockets of violence, transit vulnerabilities, and economic pressure, Bed-Stuy in 2025 lands solidly at number 6. Number 5, Mott Haven, Bronx. Now we're crossing into territory that even veteran New Yorkers side-eye after dark. Mott Haven sits in the South Bronx, and while it's technically just a few subway stops from Manhattan, it might as well be another world entirely. In 2025, it continues to rank as one of NYC's highest crime neighborhoods, and not just in reputation. NYPD CompStat data for the 40th precinct, which covers most of Mott Haven, shows violent crimes running about 45% higher than the citywide average, with robberies up 18% year-over-year and felony assaults climbing steadily since 2023. But what most people don't realize is how Mott Haven's urban layout and history lock it into cycles of danger. Decades of redlining, followed by half-hearted gentrification, created a patchwork cityscape. Luxury high-rises popping up beside, crumbling tenements, art galleries shadowed by abandoned warehouses. This uneven development creates what criminologists call perceived impunity zones, where offenders know response times are slower and surveillance is weaker. Combine that with chronic unemployment, roughly 40% above national average, and median incomes under $32,000, and you have a neighborhood simmering with economic pressure. Another hidden layer is environmental neglect. The South Bronx has some of the worst air quality in the nation, thanks to expressway truck traffic and industrial sites. That's not just a health issue. It impacts mental stress, school attendance, and even policing visibility when haze and pollution obscure line-of-sight cameras. By 2025, residents complain about police patrol cutbacks, rising fentanyl distribution, and ghost guns. Untraceable 3D-printed firearms now found in nearly 1 out of every 8 gun arrests here. Mott Haven is the kind of neighborhood where you can walk 1 block from a new vegan cafe to a street corner that's been a shooting site 3 times in 6 months. It's chaotic, uneven, and desperate, and that makes it deadly. Number 4. Tremont, Bronx. If the Bronx were a body, Tremont would be the open wound that just won't heal. Wedged between Crotona and Mount Hope, Tremont has been synonymous with street-level violence for decades, and 2025 didn't bring much relief. NYPD's 48th precinct still logs some of the highest robbery and assault rates in the city. The neighborhood's average household income barely scrapes $30,000, and unemployment hovers around 80% higher than the national average. Residents are caught between grinding poverty and over-policing, a toxic mix that keeps tensions at a boil. Most outsiders don't know this. Tremont's geography works against it. It's split by multiple elevated train tracks and steep hills, creating isolated micro-neighborhoods where police presence can't easily move. These blind pockets become crime incubators. In fact, NYPD data shows that 3 specific blocks, East Tremont Avenue between Webster and 3rd, 175th near Crotona Park, and the southern edge of Arthur Avenue, account for nearly 40% of the precinct's violent incidents. And even though the city poured millions into revitalization projects, many storefronts remain shuttered, forcing residents to travel farther for groceries or work, increasing exposure to risk. There's also a new player on the block: delivery crime. With the boom of e-commerce and gig work, muggings of delivery drivers have risen sharply, with organized drop crews targeting e-bikes and scooters. Meanwhile, older residents report break-ins during daylight hours, thieves posing as utility workers or food couriers. Housing costs are deceptively low here, averaging around $1,500 for a one-bedroom. But that affordability comes with the steep price of safety. Tremont is the kind of neighborhood where people sleep with a bat by the door, not because of paranoia, but because they've needed it before. Number 3, Brownsville, Brooklyn. If crime were an Olympic sport, Brownsville would have a dynasty. Year after year, it ranks near the bottom for public safety in New York City. In 2025, that hasn't changed, though the stats tell an even darker story. Brownsville's 73rd precinct reports violent crime rates nearly triple the city average, and shooting incidents up 22% since 2024. It's the kind of place where residents know the sound of a Glock slide, as well as they know the sound of a doorbell. But what keeps Brownsville dangerous isn't just the crime. It's the hopelessness. Median income is barely $27,000, and only 70% of residents have completed 8th grade. This isn't a community struggling with crime. It's one struggling for survival, and that makes everything harder. Schools underfunded, jobs scarce, and landlords either absentee or extortionate. Public housing projects dominate the landscape, especially the Brownsville houses and Van Dyke complexes, where many stairwells still lack functioning lights. Those conditions breed opportunity for gangs, and even though the NYPD has cracked down hard on known crews, they adapt, moving to encrypted messaging and smaller pods that control a few buildings instead of whole blocks. Another underreported issue: mental health. Brownsville has one of the highest rates of psychiatric-related emergency calls in NYC. Mix untreated trauma with easy access to weapons, and you get a feedback loop of violence. Even community-led initiatives like the Cure Violence Project, which employs former gang members to mediate disputes, struggle against systemic poverty. In short, Brownsville remains the city's murder capital per capita, a grim title earned not by chaos alone, but by a structure that keeps people trapped. Number 2, East New York, Brooklyn. Now this one might shock some, not because East New York made the list, but because it didn't take number 1. Once considered the most dangerous neighborhood in all of New York, East New York still bleeds trouble from every block. The 75th precinct consistently logs some of the highest shooting numbers in the 5 boroughs. In 2025, over 180 shootings were recorded within a single year, despite a 10% drop in population over the past decade. That means the per capita danger actually rose. Most people don't realize that East New York sits at a crossroads of forgotten industrial lots, half-demolished row houses, and brand-new luxury towers, an urban Frankenstein that confuses even the most seasoned city planners. Gentrification here doesn't just displace, it provokes. As rents spike, turf conflicts over public housing, squatter buildings, and gang territories intensify. In 2025, a new phenomenon emerged: transit crimes along the A, C, and J lines, where robbers ambush riders during the early morning commute, knowing cameras on older platforms barely function. Another thing, East New York has some of the most overcrowded schools in Brooklyn, and truancy rates are soaring past 40%. Idle youth plus easy drug access equals danger. And while community centers do what they can, funding evaporates faster than political promises. Car thefts are rampant, burglaries are up, and catalytic converter theft, yes, even that, is practically a cottage industry. The tragedy is that East New York has the bones of a great community: wide streets, historic homes, and the ghost of civic pride. But when half the block boards up by 9 p.m., you know something's wrong. Number 1, Hunts Point, Bronx. Finally, we reach the undisputed heavyweight champion of danger, Hunts Point. Located on a grim peninsula of the South Bronx, this neighborhood has a reputation so infamous that even taxi drivers hesitate to cross the drawbridge after midnight. In 2025, despite city-led resiliency initiatives and waterfront revitalization projects, Hunts Point remains the epicenter of NYC's worst social problems: poverty, prostitution, addiction, and violence. The 41st Precinct, covering most of the area, reported violent crime rates 50% higher than the borough average and robberies up 36% year over year. Few people outside the Bronx know this, but Hunts Point is home to one of the largest food distribution centers in the world, a sprawling industrial zone that runs 24/7. That means trucks, cash, transient laborers, and minimal oversight, a perfect ecosystem for theft and assault. The very infrastructure that feeds the city also hides its darker side: empty streets, dark loading bays, and truck depots where crimes can go unseen for hours. And while prostitution here has dropped since the early 2000s, it's evolved into more clandestine operations, short-term trap houses, and online-linked sex work, often controlled by organized gangs. The average household income in Hunts Point is still 58% below the national average, and unemployment hovers around 52% higher. The air smells of diesel, the streets feel abandoned, and the schools are under siege by dropout rates nearing 45%. Locals joke that you can tell how dangerous a block is by how many for sale signs are hanging. The more there are, the less likely anyone's buying. Hunts Point isn't just dangerous, it's the embodiment of urban neglect. It's a warning label for what happens when a city forgets its own people.